If there's one thing you take away from this video, let it be that there's more to Brushbuddy than meets the eye. Who is Brushbuddy? Well, he's a seemingly harmless, cute, innocent creature from Witch Hat Atelier. He looks like a ferret, he acts like a cat, and yet somehow communicates with witches in ways that feel just a little too precise. What I want to try and prove in this video is that beneath his soft, whimsical exterior lies something far more deliberate. A creature with agency, subtly guiding events without notice from any of our protagonists. A creature that may just be working alongside the mysterious brimmed cap witch. Now, to prove my case, I'm going to guide you through two specific parts of episodes 3 and 4 that will make things a lot clearer. So let's get started. In episode 3 of the anime, Koko is thrust into a test by Agot, one of her peers at Kifri's workshop, who lends her flying boots to aid her during her test. A very dangerous test, where she has to reach the peak of a floating mountain range and retrieve a single flower. At first, she struggles like one would expect, but as time goes on, she begins to master Agot's boots, flying higher and higher with more and more stability, not quite mastering it yet, but definitely making progress. However, at the climax of her training montage, she falls and grabs onto a root hanging from a mountain. And then he makes his first appearance. Brushbuddy inches away from her face, slithering down and slapping her with his fluffy tail. Koko freaks out and accidentally loses her grip, leading to her falling right into the water below, ruining her magical boots. Now, at a surface level, this seems like a harmless, cute interaction between Koko and her eventual long-term companion, but I would instead choose to frame this another way. The start of a clear pattern of feigned innocence via plausible deniability. Instead of infantilizing Brushbuddy as a creature who doesn't know any better, let's treat him with a bit more respect, because there's a very obvious alternative reading of this scene that provides a far better explanation of what he's doing here. Brushbuddy could have maintained a larger distance or more slowly revealed himself to Koko, but no, he chooses to startle her intentionally by suddenly appearing inches in front of her face. And when this initial plan of startling her doesn't work, he gets even more extreme and slithers down like a repulsive snake and slaps her face with his tail, intentionally trying to freak her out, this time to greater success. Now, why is he doing this? Well, his actions resulted in the ruining of Agot's boots, which achieves two things in a single strike. It increases Agot's resentment of Koko, while also subtly forcing Koko to use new, untested, potentially dangerous magic to achieve her goal of passing the test. Brushbuddy thus subtly guiding her toward a reckless, dangerous path of magical development. This leads me to my major hypothesis concerning Brushbuddy. Brushbuddy is an active manipulator working with the brimmed cap witch in a concerted effort through controlled adversity to subtly distance Koko from her friends while ensuring her magical success, with the goal of steering her down a path that will ultimately serve some selfish Brushbuddy benefiting end. Now, you're probably thinking that's a pretty extreme claim to make from one incident that could easily be read to just be a cute first interaction between two long-term characters. Well, don't worry, because the rest of this episode is steeped in evidence to support my reading of this scene. Firstly, there's the events immediately following Koko's fall into the water. Brushbuddy now suddenly, without reason, follows Koko everywhere. It's a bit suspicious, don't you think? If he was just this innocent creature who wasn't intentionally trying to startle her and was then subsequently drenched in water because of her, why would he follow her around like a long-time companion? I would argue his actions are much more deliberate. He's following her because ultimately his goal, like I implied before, is to ensure she succeeds in this test using dangerous magic. One of the clearest bits of supporting evidence is that right after Koko takes off Agot's boots and grabs a cloth from her bag with the intention of wiping them, Brushbuddy gets chills down his spine, likely because of how excited he is that his plan to ruin Agot's boots is playing out exactly like he and the brim-capped witch planned. And notice how after Koko accidentally wipes off the magic circle off the boots and starts freaking out, Brushbuddy's gaze doesn't budge an inch, not even for a microsecond. He obviously knew exactly how things were going to play out, so Koko's freak out doesn't surprise him one bit. Then there's the interaction with the ink pouch. This one I'm a bit less confident in, but I think it's worth bringing up, which is that seconds before the ink pouch falls to the ground and spills everywhere, we get a close-up shot of Brushbuddy seemingly sniffing it, potentially using some form of magic to make it fall to the ground to further push Koko to desperation? I'm not confident, but it was worth mentioning at least. Later in the night, we then see something interesting, which is that Koko is lying down, worried about how she will pass the test, when Brushbuddy ominously slithers out of his den and stares right at her. And literally moments later, Koko, who was wide awake only seconds ago, now has some sort of induced vision, where we see the gulf between her and her friends growing. A vision clearly induced by Brushbuddy to further subconsciously put distance between Koko and her friends. Need more evidence that it was Brushbuddy that induced this vision? Well, what's the first thing Koko sees when she wakes up? Brushbuddy, staring blankly, unwaveringly, directly at her face. Then we get even more shots of him watching over Koko like a hawk. He even cackles one time when she turns her back to him because his plan to get her to use untested magic is going almost perfectly. Then we get this interesting scene. Perhaps the most interesting scene throughout all of episode 3. In this scene, Koko is monologuing about how she thinks her new contraption will work, talking about the off-center sigil and the extended sign, but she's expressing some doubt. So what does Brushbuddy do? He climbs up under her dress, freaking her out for a bit and then escaping onto her arm. And she reads this as him signaling to her that he wants to accompany her while she tests it out. Now this felt weird to me when I first watched it because I couldn't quite place it neatly into my theory. This interaction could have multiple readings. It could be Brushbuddy trying to distract her because perhaps he thinks the glider is a bit too untested and dangerous, so he's trying to prevent her from accidentally getting killed, but his actions fail at stopping her, so I doubt that's the case. A more likely reading is that he could be trying to reassure her in her moments of lost confidence that her magic circle will in fact work, because after all, he wants her to use untested magic and probably also wants her to pass the test so that she gets put on a pedestal by Keyfree, even further distancing her from her friends. But this reading feels a bit too direct of an intervention. Encouraging her so directly feels a bit out of place, because most of his other interactions beyond the initial startling of Koko were much more subtle or in the background, and gave him more plausible deniability in terms of his intentions. But then I finally realized, he's not trying to stop her, he's not trying to remotivate her, it's much more subtle than that. He's trying to get her to let him ride with her so that he can make sure she remains safe and succeeds in her goal. And why do I feel so strongly about this? Well, I initially didn't, until I saw one tiny thing that I'm fairly sure no one else watching this anime has noticed yet. One thing that changed my mind completely. I'm talking about this frame here, where Brushbuddy is clearly using his hand to help stabilize Koko's flight. You can see him scanning the horizon for dangers in the shots right afterward too. He's clearly on high alert, trying to make sure things go smoothly. He even drags her to the left moments before she turns, subtly guiding her to the diadem herb to help her achieve her goal, while also minimizing the amount of time she spends in her dangerous flight. So let me reiterate, Brushbuddy wants to subtly guide Koko down a reckless path of magical development, while also distancing her from her friends. But then how did I arrive at the conclusion that he was working with the brimmed cap witch? Well, this one's easy, and I wouldn't be surprised if you'd already figured it out. In episode 4 of the anime, we visit Kalm, a town filled with witches. During this episode, Koko explores the town a bit before going to Noa's magic supply shop, where she learns about silverwood trees and the origins of both conjuring and regular magical ink. Just as she's about to test out a wand of her own, through the window she gets a glimpse of the brimmed cap witch. Koko drops everything and chases after the witch, her friends not far behind her, with Brushbuddy tightly wrapped around Richie's hat. But then something interesting happens, which is that the next time we cut to the girls running after Koko, Brushbuddy is suddenly trailing behind them, no longer wrapped around Richie's hat. Now why would he do this? It feels weird. He's a bit slower than them now, and it's just extra work for him to have to keep up. But then it all clicks. The girls run into a smoky cloud and are teleported to what I assume, based on next episode's title, will be called the Dragon's Labyrinth. And who gets left behind? Why, Brushbuddy, of course. Could it be any more obvious? The reason he jumped off Richie's hat, when it would purely just be an inconvenience to everyone in that moment, was because he knew what was coming. His role in his plan with the brim-capped witch was clearly to make sure that the girls followed after Koko, a subtly guiding force similar to how he subtly guided Koko when she was flying in the sky last episode. So yeah, Brushbuddy is clearly working with the brimmed cap witch. And what's the next stage of his plan? Well, obviously, wait for enough time to pass for Koko to be alienated by her friends, like what happens in this episode, so that he can then lead Keyfree back to the Dragon's Labyrinth and force him to have to choose between saving either Koko or her friends. And no matter what choice he makes, the outcome will push Koko further and further down the ominous dark path that Brushbuddy has laid before her. So yeah, that's it. My theory about Brushbuddy. I'm very excited to see more of Witch Hat Atelier, to see how his plan continues to play out, especially next episode, the Dragon's Labyrinth. I wonder who the real dragon might be.